Okay, welcome to today's lesson. Today we will be covering the topic of convergent plate boundaries. We're going to deal with the second type of plate boundary. So for today's lesson, what you will need with you is the A4 piece of paper, sorry, the A3 piece of paper that we have folded into half the previous lesson, and where you have already sketched in your oceanic plate boundary, convergent plate boundary, okay, the previous week in week. So what we'll be doing today is we're going to add on another diagram, another convergent plate boundary, still involving oceanic plates, but with another type of tectonic plate, the continental plate. Now, I would like to bring your attention back to some of the foundation ideas that we talked about before we commenced the landforms. You do need to remember that in the earlier diagram when we talk about two oceanic plates are the denser plates, and as a result of the density of these plates, you will often encounter a case where these plates will subduct, right? When you're talking about oceanic plates, they definitely will subduct. It's a matter of which one subducting in the event where you have two oceanic plates. Normally, the one that is slightly denser will be the one that subducts, but that is not always the case when you're dealing with continental plates. Okay, so bear in mind, continental plates are a different type of plates. Density wise, they are much lighter than oceanic plates, and therein, if they do come in an encounter with an oceanic plate, the continental plate will not subduct. The oceanic plate will definitely be the one that subducts. Okay, so the subduction plate will follow the normal behavior. It will go into the mantle, it will melt, and should there be some fractures on the continental plate itself, it will also come up through those fractures and possibly form subduction volcanoes. Now, why is this volcano called the same thing as what the ones we saw in your oceanic convergent plate boundaries? Because technically they are the same thing. They are formed as a result of subduction um, of one plate into the mantle, causing an increase in acid lava in the area, and the acid lava is being pushed upwards through fractures that are formed on the other plate, which has gone through faulting. Okay, so if it's the same thing, the terminology they use is the same. Do not get confused between the OO convergence and the OC convergence. The diagram is slightly different. So processes involved here largely the same. You have subduction, you have volcanism, you have faulting, you have faulting, and of course we experience it as earthquakes. Only slight difference are in your features form. Besides having the oceanic trench and four mountains, what is the other thing you may actually encounter is four mountains. Okay, besides oceanic trench and volcanoes, I mean, so you may encounter four mountains as well. Right, so diagram wise, this is once again the 3D diagram that you can see here. Well, what is this volcanic arc? Basically, it's a mountainous range that is peppered with volcanoes. Doesn't mean that every single mountain you see in this volcanic arc is going to be made of volcanoes, not necessarily. Some of them may actually be four mountains, okay, with no magma chamber in between, because for the magma chamber to occur, for the volcano to grow, you do need fracturing below it. Sometimes the fracturing just doesn't occur, okay? So it's not hard science, it's really, nature is more of an art than really hard science. So in this case here, if you look at the rest of the diagram, the other things are actually more or less the same. You still have the deep sea trench, you still have the oceanic crust merging into the mantle, and you have on the other side now slightly different, you have continental crust. Now bear in mind, continental crust will not subduct, it will not subduct. I cannot repeat this enough times. Continental crust, is less dense and therefore it will not subduct. Keep this in mind. The dramatic one here, okay, now this particular one, we fill in the examples for you. So if you look at the location here, we're looking at actually the Australian plate. The oceanic plate is the Australian plate. Okay, even Australia is a landmass and it's a continent on its own. The Australian plate is larger than the continent of Australia. So technically, the Australian plate is more over water than over the continent itself. So Australian plate uniquely at this point here is an oceanic plate. All right. So the other plate that is hitting against, of course, the Eurasian plate, and this actually helps us to form the Barresa mountain range that is found in Indonesia. Okay, the deep sea trench you see here, the Sunda trench, very important, one of the very unique locations in Southeast Asia where you have very deep sea trench with a lot of marine life and a lot of mystery. Okay, much like the Mariana Trench that we talked about earlier on for oceanic convergence. Now, the Barresa mountain range that is listed here is a mountain range that consists of two different types of things. So some parts of it are full mountains, some because the continental plate actually folded and landforms or tall landforms in this particular case were formed. Some of them had fracturing inside the continental crust itself, and that fracturing allowed the magma to flow upwards, and then eventually they became volcanoes. So what I've covered so far basically is encompassed in the next couple of slides, right? So key concepts: oceanic plate will meet continental plate, which is denser. The oceanic plate is denser. So what happens to the denser one? It will subduct. It will go back into the mantle. It will melt. At the point, the subduction zone, the V-shaped subduction zone once again, what do we form? We form the oceanic trench. That's important. Please note that. Compressional force will lead to your continental plate having fractures, faulting, and folding. And when that happens, sometimes the mantle material will seep through and form volcanoes on top. Right, so volcanoes can be formed on the other side, right? Sometimes when that magic doesn't happen, when you don't have fracturing, which is very unlikely. I repeat, it's very unlikely that you get a situation where you have no fracturing, no faulting on your continental plate. Very unlikely. You may have just whole mountains, but it is very unlikely. As long as you see oceanic continental plate convergence, right, or location or a diagram that shows oceanic plate hitting against, compressing against your continental plate, you will logically expect to see some volcanoes appear. Okay, that is a par for the course, is something that you should expect. Okay, now earthquakes. Why do you feel earthquakes? Then whenever you have this kind of tectonic movement, there's always going to be a lot of stored energy because it's not smooth. You see, two plates they are rough at the edges, and when you have rough edges, they will interlock with one another. So the force that is pushing these two plates will force this interlocking to break and to shudder. And when the force is sufficient and it breaks free, it will jerk into a new position, literally jerk into a new position, and this process of this jerking into this new position releases a lot of energy. Now, this energy is what we experience as an earthquake. Okay, so seismic waves is the term given to the energy that's released. It's released in the form of energy waves. Okay, just like sound dissipates in term form of a wave, right? Seismic waves refer to the energy that's released in the event of an earthquake. So this is the diagram. This is the diagram that we need to draw. I will be running through with you how we actually go about drawing this diagram. This is the oceanic continental plate convergence diagram. Once again, there are annotations that are missing in the original diagram here. So the one that we draw will have the full range of annotations. So at this moment in time, you may want to take a pause and go back to your A3 piece of paper, flip to a new side, construct your box 10 cm by 15 centimeters. Please try to put it in the middle of the portrait orientation of an empty page. Okay. After you've got your box out, what I need you to put is, of course, the line and then to include your title of Oceanic Continental Plate Convergence. So I'm now going to move away from this particular screen. I'm going to go into second screen and let's do this, right? So I'm going to show you how, similarly to what we did the other day, we're going to do another one. This one now is continental and oceanic plate convergence. So once again, I'm going to have my box out. I'm going to have my line to represent the area for me to put my title in. So before you do anything, always remember you have to label. You have to write your title down. So I got this down already. I'm going to focus on continental oceanic plate convergence today. Now the components that we're going to sketch today is very, very similar. At the beginning, you're still going to draw one oceanic plate. This oceanic plate is still going to enter into the mantle area here. So your labeling, please include your labeling. Now, because I already know I'm going to draw the Barresa mountain range, right? So I am going to do something a bit different. In my labeling process, I'm already going to key in the name of these mountains, volcanoes, as well as the plate that I'm going to talk about here. So once again, this plate will have the zigzag lines to remind. Okay, bear in mind these zigzag lines here are something that I invented. Okay, is why do I do this? Is a reminder to myself that there's compression, there's going to be folding, there's going to be faulting on this side of the plate. So which plate are we talking about? Yes, the oceanic plate. We are talking about the Australian plate. So please label, which is an oceanic plate, right? Then the other plate that we're talking about is the Eurasian plate, which is a continental plate. Okay, so I've got my two plates labeled. My landforms actually drawn here. So this is the Barresa mountain range. This is a subduction volcano. And the one behind, the little mound I have drawn there, is my interpretation of what a full mountain in this range would look like. So these form the Barisan mountain. Okay, once again, you have these thing here that is your deep sea trench, the Sunda trench, which is a deep sea trench. Right, I'm going to draw the line to represent where the sea is. Okay, fill in where the sea is. Okay, and one last thing. Do you remember this dotted area here? What is this dotted area here? This dotted area is our subduction zone. Okay, so what are the annotations that we do need to put in here then? Right, so first one, of course, the Australian plate. What happens to the Oceanic plate? What must you talk about? You must tell me the key element here. It is denser. So what if it's denser? It will subduct. So I mentioned that already. Next, I will of course need to talk about your Eurasian plate. What happens to the Eurasian plate over here? So the key thing, what will happen to it? It will fold, fracture, and fault, and form four mountains And more importantly, or not forgetting, the other thing it will form is volcanoes. Okay, so that's it. Right. Lastly, what do I have that's missing? My deep sea trench here is missing, so I'm going to draw line down and do a description for my an annotation for my deep sea trench. So I've completed my entire annotation. I'm going to put it in this other view, right? So you can have a better look at it. Okay, I will also be putting an image of it into Teams, so you will have a complete image of a fully illustrated diagram. And so I hope you can get this thing done in your own pieces of paper. Now, bear in mind, like we mentioned earlier on, this component here, you do need to have practice. So you need to draw this once with me. You need to draw this once more at home as your own revision. And then if you're within the year itself, we will definitely draw this a third time, either be it for revision or you will encounter this within one of your assignments, okay, or assessments, be it WA3 or end of the year exam. So in totality, this year you will encounter this 3 times. Right, so for the rest of the time that you have, I will need you to go and take a look at your first diagram as well as the second diagram we've drawn today. Do a quick comparison. What are the key differences between the two diagrams? What have we drawn into the continental oceanic convergence, especially the part on the continental plate? What have we added? What have we taken away in comparison with our oceanic plate convergence? Why is it, think about this, why is it that we don't have four mountains forming when we are talking about an oceanic plate that is higher in density? So this concept of density is very important here. If it's higher in density, maybe that's the key reason why we do not see four mountains as often. We do see fracturing, but we don't see four mountains, because for you to be able to maneuver a four mountain, to form a four mountain in this kind of situations is not that easy using high density oceanic plates. Okay, so keep this in mind and make use of the rest of the time that you have to touch up your images and to do a quick review of this. Right, the next lesson we will be moving on to the final one in the Convergent plate series, which will encompass all that will be in the testing range for your WA3. Okay, so the final one is a little bit different. It is two continental plates, and therefore you don't have subduction at all. All right, so I'll see you in the next lesson. Have a good day ahead.